Alright, so I thought I'll make a video on how to repair runs, and there's plenty of videos, good videos on how to repair runs, but some of them lack a little bit of you know extra layers, and you can never get enough information about how to do something differently, or a better way, or you know just how to make it more efficient, and how to make it work, so it's not so daunting. And runs are one of those things that they're just daunting. They're just really a shit thing to deal with. Now, one thing about runs is, you've got to sort of know. Well, you've got to sort of work out, is it worth even repairing? Is it worth repairing a run? Sometimes when you get so many of them, or it's just ridiculous. It's usually best just to sand back, get rid of the run, like gouge it out, and sand it back and spread a fucking panel and be done with it. But sometimes they're worth repairing, and sometimes doing it at home, you don't have that extra bloody paint, or whatever the case is. Either way, you might just want to repair it. Now, we sprayed this in cold weather, and first two coats, no problems, and then the last coat, we got problems, we got runs, and I expected a run or two. It was the panels were hitting at about 9 degrees. Outside temperature was roughly around 14 degrees, and even after warming up the paint and everything, we still end up getting a few runs. And I'm not painting it again. I'm going to fix them. It's not too much, enough to piss you off, definitely. But and the paint was an issue. Nothing was there was nothing wrong with the way it got sprayed or anything. What was wrong was, climate, temperature, whatnot, and it's going to happen. All right, it happens. Anyway, so I'm not going to go too crazy about why and what. You can sort of look that up. But so how do we repair these bloody things? Well, look at this run. All right. That's a nice little doobie. That's a nice doobie. Not so bad. Fuck all. But, so there's methods. And one of the most common methods, is, put a bit of body filler there, bog, and sand it back and whatnot. And it works great, but there's layers to it, okay? So what I do is I look at which way the runs are going, like how's it, where's the high and low spots, what's the V line of the actual run itself. By V line I'm meaning, well, that there, the doobie, is the doobie, but that didn't just come there. So it's coming from this angle down to here, this angle down to here. Same with that one, all right? And what I do before I even gouge it out with some tungsten and razor blades and whatnot is I put tape there. The reason I put tape there is so when I put my tungsten onto it, I don't risk accidentally getting the razor blade and gouging out along this bit here, or there or wherever I run it. I wouldn't just gouge the doobie out, yeah, and maybe a little bit of that V that's involved as well. Like that's a nice one. Look at that. That's fucking shocking. Anyway, so that's a layer. It's a layer, insurance layer that I'm not going to accidentally stuff it up. Do you need it? No, but, and usually, if I'm in a real rush, I won't bother with the tape. But, sometimes that bites you in the ass. So, tape. Sometimes I won't even use body filler if I feel real comfortable and I've got a real stress-free day. Sometimes, I've many of times fucking, managed to get these out without body filler. Just the right angle of the dangle with the sandpaper and different, grades of paper, and you can do a reasonably good job. In fact, I personally can do a great job without adding body filler to it. But body filler is another layer of insurance. That tape is another layer of insurance. I don't even remove the tape when I put the body filler on raw. Why? Because I've exposed what needs to be sanded, okay? And a little bit beyond, fuck all, but a little bit, all right? And I will skim some body filler on that as well after I've gouged out the doobie. I will skim a bit of body filler with the tape there, because when I use sandpaper again, I don't really have to worry about sandpaper touching here. It's concentrated where it needs to be, okay? And then I can rip the tape off and, feather it over, and she's all good. Do you need the tape again? No. Is it a great idea? Yes, once you start using it, you will never go back, because it actually makes the job quicker in the long run, because you're not actually touching anything that you don't need to be touching, and then once you rip it off, you skim a little bit over and you're ready to go, and what I mean with the bog over it, so that's been gouged, and that's now got a skim of body filler on it. It's on the tape. Who gives a shit? That's going to rip off. There you go. There's a bit that I don't have tape on top. The reason being is, I don't think I need it. I'm comfortable enough that that's all good. All right. But should I have it on there? Yeah, it would have had that little layer of extra protection. But because it's so high up, all I've got is this line here. I'm only going to be running the sander this way, and that I'll just feather out real quick. There's some more examples. As you can tell, they're like, most of these are very, very tiny runs like that. It's just nothing virtually. Could have done it without any of this, but I just don't want to risk it. I don't want to be doing extra work later. So, and here's one that I'm just using body filler on, because it's a very, very tiny skim, and it just needs to be fitted out. That most people wouldn't even repair that. As in, you could hardly see that. But so just another way of doing it. And when I was an apprentice, I wasn't a painter. I was as you can tell, the amount of runs, I'm not a painter. No, but I can paint. I do a reasonably good job, apart from this fucking job. One of the things I got put through as an apprentice was fixing up runs for the painters, because even in professional scenes, it happens. It happens a lot more than what you might think, because it just fucking does. And so sometimes it's punishment if we were as apprentices little shits. One of the things, you're doing run repair today, and as soon as you heard that, that was like, okay, the day's fucked. But you get inventive. You get really, really inventive. And because you got a whole day to think about how you're going to repair this. And, they're pretty much going to tell you, if you haven't repaired these runs, you're going to be doing it tomorrow as well. So the key was to be quick. Sometimes we get, 2-3 cars. And, some of them would have a lot of runs, some would have only 1, 2, whatever. Either way, they had to get fixed because the boss was pretty tight, and we were cheap. We were back in the day, we were on, $5 an hour. So we were cheap. and we could, you know, he'd use us to fix this rather than, you know, get it back into the booth, you know. So we got inventive. So we found ways to make this thing work really, really quick, really efficiently. And this is one of the ways, you know. But, you know, I'll go through just real quickly on sandpaper. So I would attack, well, and tools that you require. So, you know, a razor blade. And what I do with the razor blades is, if you have a look at that, I've ground back the sides, the corners, you know, they're not there. All right, because the razor blade looks something like that, okay? With the corners, yeah? Take those corners off. That's another layer of insurance that you're not gonna gouge with them corners, you know? Once they're removed, it's a different ball game. So much easier, so much less effort to not do stupid stuff. And then you've got, I've got it here somewhere, your tungstens. Now back in the day, when I was an apprentice, this wasn't a thing. You had your razor blades and you had sandpaper. Your tungsten, carbide tungsten, yeah? And that works pretty much like a razor, you know? It's mainly used to get little bits of dust and, you know, crap out of the paint, but you can gouge out with it. And if you notice, that's rounded off as well, because sharp corners in this would be next to, you know, not useless, but it'd be really difficult to use. So you got to think about the razor blade as well. You know, it's a lot easier to use without them corners. Then sandpaper. So what I normally do, again, depending on the paint, so this is a solid 2K, but it's very forgiving to work with. And you'd work with this much as you would with your clear. And that is, I normally hit those with about a 320 to begin with, wet and dry. Sometimes I do begin with dry, but generally wet and dry. And then from the 300, once I've knocked off, you know, the bulk of it, and what I mean the bulk is just the doobie bit here, you know, that doobie bit, knock that down a bit. As soon as I start getting into that area where it's a little bit more, you know, you're coming into the hot zone, you know, I get onto the 600. Get blocked out a bit, and as soon as that 600 clears up the body work and all you're seeing there is white paint, pretty much, then I move on to the 1000, and that's pretty much finishing. The 1000 will finish it off, and then, you know, 2000, you know, I get it down to 2000, and that's sort of ready to start buffing out that little area. All right. So that's it, you know, a little bit of an insight on how you can fix up a run with a bit of bog, a bit of tape, some gouging stuff and some sandpaper, and you don't have to respray. Now, some of these panels, you know, you might look at it here and goes, oh, that's bad. They're, you know, they're nothing, you know, and, you know, in many cases, you know, some of these so-called runs, especially on this panel, you know, somebody might not even bother with, you know, because then they're so insignificant. But if you want a good job, they become very significant, you know. This is a work ute. Should I be doing this? No, but, you know, I want to make it look pretty. It's for my dad, you know, so, you know, I can't leave it in good faith just because, you know, he's going to fucking complain. But, you know, but then you get some fucking bad ones like this, and, you know, going back to, should you be redoing the panel? Well, you could, you know, but, and this, you could do the panel again, but why would you? This is going to take about, you know, about 15 minutes, by the time it's buffed out and everything, you know, call it half an hour, yeah. And if you're working these, you know, all together, you know, I mean, you know, I don't recommend you doing one then the other. You know, get it all taped off, get the bog on there. Normally I'd put bog here as well. I just thought, well, I better stop and show you what sort of runs I'm working with. But these are the worst. The other ones weren't this bad. Should you repair it or not is, you know, it's an up to you thing, but you don't need to, you know, stress too much about it. Give it a shot, and you can fix these things quite easily. And you know, especially with a solid paint like this, it's easy. You don't have to. You don't have to put clear on it again or nothing. You know, you just buff this out, and she's good. You know, as long as the rest of the job is pretty reasonably, you know, great. You won't even have to buff the whole panel out. You know, like you know the rest of the spray job here is actually really good. So you know, I might just get away with, you know, just where those runs are, you know, just buffing out, you know, literally just those areas. You know. Anyway, yeah, so there you have it, okay? Just another look into how to repair them spots. By the way, where that blue tape is, it's where I had little tiny bits of, you know, what I would call rubbish in the paint and whatnot. You know, they were minor stuff, but, you know, so I've sanded that back a little bit, and it's getting ready for, you know, buff. And sometimes, because my eyes aren't that good, so, you know, I'm using these things. You know, I might forget or I might miss it and I might not buff it up. So, you know, the good thing is, like, if you've got a few of these, you know, mark it with something so you know, when you come back to it, you go, oh, yeah, they're there, you know, and I've got to buff these areas out. Otherwise, you know, it's likely, you know, you could miss it, and then, you know, you'll just be coming back to it. It's just a reference point, you know. Alrighty, there you go.